And can I get all the speakers to come up? And our three panelists. So what we're going to have now, I mean, this was a session on capacities and innovation. Now, what we mean by capacities, we have talked about data, we talk about technology, but clearly skills, people, are absolutely fundamental. And we all know that Inspire is a big challenge, and we are quite short of the number of people with the skills necessary in order to implement Inspire, but also to go and work in SMEs, to develop those innovative ideas, those policies, etc., etc. So here I have a panel that has been carefully chosen to represent academia. So I've got the Vice Rector of the Polytechnic of Milano in Como and a member of the OSGeo sort of found education. I've got OSGeo man himself, the inventor of GeoNetwork, so he represents an SME, if you want, with some innovative ideas, not many, but a few. And I've got Mike Gould, who is a hybrid. He's half of himself is in education at the University of Castellón, and 10%, well, yeah. And 90% is with one of the big boys, you know, ESRI, so not quite an SME, but still with some new innovative ideas now and then. So, ladies and gentlemen, you have heard all these lot. Are you convinced? Do you think that they have the recipe to deliver? We got an SME, we had a consultant. Well, this is like a joke, you know, an English, an Australian, a German. Okay, so we have an SME, we have a consultant, we have the public sector, and the European...
I have to choose.
Where is the European Commission gone? I'm missing one. No, not me. It's got, the European Commission is gone. Oh dear, oh dear, oh dear. Anyway, we had the European Commission, you had it there. Okay, pretend it's still there, okay? So are you convinced?
So the point is that I have to choose one of them?
No.
No, okay. Okay, yes, in my opinion, every speech was very informative, but what most convinced me was Jesse, about the idea of innovation and how can we try to innovate considering starting from the open government. And, but in my opinion, the only point that you missed was the importance of the university in that process. You just mentioned the university, but in my opinion, university is very important in educating young people and preparing them for working with Inspire. So my idea is that university can do a lot, and we want to do a lot. And if I can summarize just in one sentence, in my opinion, is going from some years ago, we spoke about e-government. Now it's better to say open e-government. And in my opinion, Inspire can be the pervasive platform to reach this open government. That's my idea. And university can play an important role in that. Okay.
Okay, thank you very much, Maria, for this initial statement. Let me sort of move on to Jeroen. Oh, he's got his own mic.
Yes. So what I saw in this whole discussion is basically that we are, as small medium enterprises that I try to represent, in an absolute minority here. While we're out of this room, we're in the absolute majority. It's kind of inverted. So what I wonder is if this group here is trying to kill small, medium enterprises by coming up with more and more standards, which is what I've seen. And that kind of frightens me. And sometimes I wonder if beyond those standards that you are developing and pushing on us as small, medium enterprises that we then have to try to implement, you would leave some of that to the small, medium enterprises or to the wider public to decide what standards are actually useful. I've seen another catalog thing coming up, which kind of frightens me. I've been in catalog business for 13 years or something. And now there's another thing coming, and I don't really see the need of those sometimes. And sometimes it feels like, okay, another research project trying to kill us with more standards coming out.
But that's a very, very valid point. But that begs the question, how can we get the interest of the small and medium enterprise more fully represented? I mean, clearly, a small company cannot devote one person to follow the emergence of a technical specification or a standard of this and that and the other. But how can we pool all these micro competencies into saying, look, what you're doing is bollocks, you know, just don't do it. Or
one thing that I notice is that I've, and I definitely also take the blame on myself, but I've seen a lot of groups coming up with developing those new standards. As an open source project in Inspire, we've not been invited once to join in such a development of a standard. As a small, medium enterprise, the same thing. I mean, we've been implementing in countries, and we've been doing a lot of implementation, but from the JRC or Inspire project, we've not seen a thing coming out. And that kind of frightens me, so it's kind of drop it over the fence, and then the open source community or the small, medium enterprises do something with it. While I think at the start, you as, let me just put it roughly, the government should ensure that those private sector parties are actually hired, paid for, and join, and not only think that we should come up for free and join the party of developing another standard. We can't afford it.
So there's clearly here some responsibilities on our side. Also, the national government representative, I'm sure they will have to share some of this because they are their natural counterparts. But there are clearly issues that need to be addressed in terms to make sure that some of the people who are also then called on to help implement these solutions have a voice. That's very important. But let's hear from one of the big boys.
Okay, thank you, Max. Microphone?
We are talking about innovations again here. Yes. So let me put this question. You are an American, working for an American company, but you know Europe very well because you've been here most of your professional life. So what is it that we are doing wrong in Europe and not to get as much innovation as you do in the US?
Europe is not making the data openly available so that small and medium enterprises can run with the data and do interesting things.
That's one thing.
That created the US industry. The government published dirty data, and the small and medium enterprises picked it up, cleaned up the data, and created added value, and created an entire industry.
So if we have good quality data, then we are doomed. You know, what you need to do, folks, is take your data, just make it rubbish, put it out there, and then you can create an industry.
The assumption that the data that we produce is perfect or exactly what users are looking for, I think, is a bit overly ambitious. I very much enjoyed the first speakers here in this session because several of them mentioned the key role of small and medium enterprises. You rightly mentioned that Esri itself is not an SME, but actually the European representation is made up of SMEs, and so most of the distributors are locally owned companies. Most of which have less than 500 employees. Esri Germany is an exception. It's got more than 500 employees and has, I think more importantly, 90 business partners. So many of the implementations that you would give to an Esri, it's actually not to an Esri, it's to a business partner. It's to a small company. And so I think that's important to remember. And we'd like to have more small companies doing the implementation. And I think we've seen many cases here and in other sessions today and in past years whereby maybe the government's implementing too many things and not providing specific requirements to small and medium enterprises that can do the implementations. So I think that's where perhaps there's a bit of sort of, sometimes we lose touch with what is the role of each institution. With my university hat on, I realize that sometimes we implement things when we shouldn't either, right? We should be researching things, and if some research idea makes sense to implement, that should go off into a small company or a large company, and the company should actually do the implementation. We heard in the case of our first speaker here on the panel, earlier in the plenary session. Several references to services that in the end people didn't want. We created services or apps that we thought people would like, and oh, surprise, they didn't want that. Well, the way the companies work is not by just throwing things out there and see if they stick. Perhaps some companies do. But in most cases, the company works against concrete user requirements. And I think in many cases, we're missing the concrete user requirements. I hear people talking about use cases. I think we need to be careful with a use case. A use case is an abstraction. It says, we have an idea. This might be useful for hydrologists, or this might be useful for people who work in city administration. Let's test it. That's different from saying, the city administration just phoned us up and said, we need this application, and it needs to work this way, and it needs to be done on time, and here's our budget. Different way of working. So perhaps the government's role is to decide what citizens do really need, and then to farm those projects out to businesses who can decide how to do it profitably, how to do it in a way that users are going to want to utilize the systems, the applications or the services. And if the users aren't going to use them, the businesses are going to go out of business or are going to have trouble, and then they'll come back and they'll tell the government, maybe this wasn't such a great idea. So I think we need to be a little bit more, get our feet down, on the ground, into the earth, and try to figure out what's really going to be viable and what people really do want.
Okay, Mike, thank you very much for this. But you raised an important issue that is, well, sometimes at universities we have a good idea and we start implementing, but maybe we shouldn't be doing that. We should give it to a private sector to do. So, Jerome, how often do you interact with a university or a set of universities and work with them to get their ideas and to implement them?
I think a lot. We take, for instance, we have people that come from university students that do a practical period work with us, and we work in FP7 projects, for instance, to work on innovation. So, yeah, we try to connect closely, also on the open source front. So try to get universities to actually work with white boxes, so to speak, instead of black boxes, and have them actively contribute to projects and to development of knowledge and new innovative ideas. So.
And are you of the same idea as Mike that what you need in Europe in order to turn ideas into innovation and growth is just data? If just government just publish the data, that would be it?
No, it will help a lot. I think the data part will actually help a lot. I think the infrastructure that Inspire provides will help a lot in innovation. And I can see us starting to develop new applications using that data, while my company is actually more on the infrastructure part. So it's really kind of new fields that we're trying to explore.
Well, I thought that venture capital was the one thing that Europe didn't have, that the US has, but hey, I was wrong. It's just data. So that's good news. Maria, let me turn to you. And, are you working a lot with SMEs and getting your students to engage with them?
Yes, but I want just to tell you something about a new experiment we are doing exactly in the last few years at Politecnico. So the idea is, the name is Lake Poly School, and the idea is to interconnect people from companies. So we have, for every project, we have a mentor from a company, students, and one mentor from university. And the company decided the project, and then the students work with the mentor of the company and the university mentor on that project. But in this case, we consider many different students coming from many different disciplines. Okay, we are all engineers, but the management engineers, the environmental engineers, the ICT engineers and so on, working on that project. And at the end of the lab, they produce a prototype. And the request is that then, if the idea is good and the prototype is good also, the company will help the students to create an SME. And so that is something that is interesting because it happens at the end. And okay, we have also an incubator at Polytechnic of Milan that can help the student, but it's really important to have the experience of people working in companies and suggesting us real problems to be solved. And at the end, there is not the product, obviously, because it's just a work of a few months, and also because it's a way to give an opportunity to students to create their own SMEs.
Okay, thank you very much. Just one final question for our education. Demand and supply, though. Shane said very rightly in Australia we have a problem that we don't have enough skilled people. And we have the same problems here, I believe. It's very difficult to recruit people who can implement all these fancy standards and technologies that Inspire is requiring. So how can we turn out more people who have the right skills in order to implement Inspire, link to open data, develop application, etc., etc.? Mike, your thoughts in a minute.
Need to focus more on computer science. I think we've been focusing too much on the typical GIS user who studies biology, geography, whatever. We need to focus more on computer science. I think Inspire is not a category, so you're not going to see jobs out there, people to implement Inspire. Okay? What does an agency need? It needs people who know how to build and maintain servers, middleware, and clients. You don't learn that in geography. You don't learn that in biology.
Okay, so, and can universities do it all, Jerome?
Well, I kind of agree with Mike. We also hire IT experts more than geo experts, and although we do have some geo experts. But if universities deliver them, yeah, universities and high schools, probably.
So
I don't know.
Do you have enough supply, Maria?
Not enough.
If it is necessary, we will have more people.
Yeah, but
prepared.
you need people who apply first.
Yeah.
That's the
Yeah,
problem, is that a lot of people will think that what we are doing is boring.
No, it's not true. If you explain to young people that it's important and that it's an occasion for them to find a job after, I think that they're enough smart to understand that.
Okay. Now, how am I doing for time? I got 2 minutes more for one questions from my side, and then I'm going to open. So start thinking about your own questions, because we're going to come around with the microphones. Let me turn to regional specialization, because I thought that was very important. In the old days, when you wanted to develop some innovation, it was very fashionable to have industrial clusters. So you had this notion that, you tried to emulate what was happening in Silicon Valley and do it in Cambridge, do it in this area, do it in that area. Does that work as well with open government, open students, open innovation? So is that the way to go, to create clusters, to bring people together? How can universities contribute to regional specialization? Jesse, would you like to tell us? Yes, of course. You're our expert.
Well, I don't believe in throwing away things where a lot of money has been invested in the first place. And also, I'm increasingly uncertain about just about any oversimplified, easy formula. We have to realize what's going on in the world around us. Even the concept of job is disappearing. The people that go to Milan Polytechnic, I'm not sure how sure they're going to get a job, or whether there will be companies giving jobs. What I see happening is young students doing co-working, trying to reinvent something where it's not a company that gives the job to people and it's on the market. All of that is sort of disappearing. I don't want to say that there's nothing we can do. Clusters are places where I think what the shift is happening towards looking at competence rather than market sectors. What are people good at, and how can they, and there's a shift in looking towards contamination rather than isolation. How can we get a cluster to work well with a group of volunteers doing something in the territory? How can we ground things to the territory in a stronger way? But in that sense, a cluster can be looked at as a resource of a region as much as a Greek temple, as much as a volunteer group, as much as a university campus. We need to, what we really need to do is to look at our territories and see what resources are there. What are the ingredients we can make innovation happen with? We're used to filtering too much and oversimplified views of reality, I think.
And Giacomo, you've been working in southern Italy, so an area where there is a definite need for innovation, but it exists. So how do you foster that?
Well, I have to say that we are quite in a good shape in that desperate area, because there is, in terms of knowledge transfer, there are many initiatives with startup companies, seeding capital, so that particularly in the ICT domain. So I think this is a very important role that universities in our area, together with bigger, large companies, are taking, because they are providing a sort of support for our situation. So I have to say that fortunately, in this particular case, we are quite advanced, and we are taking a lot of benefit from this situation. So I have to say that I'm happy with that.
Good. And with this cheerful note, who wants to now put some questions? Can we have some hands coming up? Oh gosh, you're all so shy. Either you're very hungry or you're entirely convinced, but everything you've heard, you know, there's plenty of supply of people. If we just publish more data and it wasn't so good, things would be better. And Maria.
Can I add one more example? Because in last days we had also here a challenge related to NASA Wind, so to the development by university teams of NASA Wind with specific applications. And in my opinion, it was really an amazing challenge. And the results we got from students, and not only students, but because there were students and there were also SMEs, as a matter of fact. And what we got was really impressive. So if you're interested, just a bit of advertisement. Tomorrow morning at 9, Patrick Hogan from NASA is going to explain the results we got from that challenge. But by the way, in very few months, we have got very fantastic work done by students and by those young researchers into the SMEs, as a matter of fact.
So hopefully a lot of those innovative ideas will be turned into an SME or developed by an SME into some innovative product. Our own Alessandro Noni would like to have a question for the panel.
Yeah, there is something strange that came in my mind, because every day we receive requests to support capacity building and to provide technical support for the implementation of INSPIRE. That means that there is a big business behind in helping public governments in implementing INSPIRE services, in understanding INSPIRE services, in building capacity, and so on. So apparently, there is a big business for most medium enterprise to provide services. And maybe one of the issue that you have to raise is how to make your companies or your universities more attractive, or to be consultant of public services. So how you can, for example, there are countries in which there are not capacities, so in which way the small medium enterprise are able to work outside their territory. Maybe in which there is a huge competition, but there are other countries in which nobody is acting. So the question is, are you exploring really all the possibility of the market in terms of providing support to the people that have to implement INSPIRE, that I agree is quite complex and require specific skills?
Well, if I react as a small enterprise, sorry, we are actually doing, I think, 80 to 90% of our business outside of the Netherlands, so in Europe, but also outside of Europe. So I think that I wasn't complaining about any lack of work. It was much more about having a group that is developing standards for INSPIRE and working on that aspect, and actually requesting people to participate on kind of a voluntary basis in that process, which I, as a small company, cannot afford to. And where I think that sometimes, you know, I'm not, that's why I was saying it's also a part of my fault. I'm not a very pushy guy that will run into your office and knock all the time, let me in, and I want to contribute. You have to hire me. At the same time, I also know that we have substantial knowledge and capacities to offer, where I think that the request to, even if it's our open source software community, could be put out at some point from an Inspire to come and contribute, invite us to actually do some paid work. And then we'll see who is actually doing the job, but yeah.
Just add one thing. I think that if the requirements are properly expressed, you'll have lots of companies jumping up, willing to help out. I think oftentimes the requirements are not fully expressed. In the sessions I've attended these past days, I'm seeing lots of confusion regarding cloud, regarding open source, regarding all sorts of standards, regarding all sorts of different items. But being confused or sort of, I see a little bit of sort of uneasiness, but if that's not expressed in terms of requirements, then it's difficult for a company to jump in and say, okay, we'll help you with that specific need during X amount of days, and that has a price tag attached to it.
Yeah, but Mike, that's always the debate between, you know, the technologies that says, give me user requirements, and the guy in the public office says, well, tell me what you can do for me. And often it's the dialogue between the deaf and the dumb. So, you know, you need to work together in order to articulate what, I mean, the administrator knows what is needed, but it can never express it as a proper user requirement. So, you know, that partnership needs to be developed further, you know. I got Robin here who has a question. First, Robin, you go.
Okay, hi guys. What's the one thing from each of your perspectives we need to do to contribute to this capacity building? The one thing. Because I ask, because I'm working on the ARENA project that Jabi mentioned, is now not here. And one of the things we could be looking into is to help with that capacity. The main purpose is trying to share reusable components for Inspire open source software and other things. But this capacity building issue is going to be fundamental in the end. So what's that other bridge? What's the one thing from each of your perspectives is going to help with that capacity building?
Let's start from Australia for once.
I mean, I guess for us, we're still very much learning.
Can we have this microphone going, please? Yep.
I guess for us, we're still very much learning what you're doing. So the more that is...
But how do you build capacity in Australia?
We're building, I guess, our capacity within Australia is in a sense of a coordination role, we're starting to engage the research community. We've got a program in Australia called the Collaborative Research Council, SI, which is based out of the Curtin University in Western Australia. It's a collaboration project because it involves universities, SMEs and government. In some cases our role in government is to actually fund that research to ensure that what we want to implement is actually usable to both research and our end users, which is going to be the SMEs. That's a project that has worked really well for us in Australia. We're currently looking at the current supply chains, which business and government business is dealing with information. And we want to make sure that that's done effectively. And we don't want it to be caught in the research environment where it becomes a paper and gets filed away. We want to make sure that it is has meaning to industry and has meaning to government, and is obviously something that we build our relationships with the research community.
And Seth, how do you build capacity in the environmental sector?
Well, if I look at my experiences in these projects, then what I see is there's money for scientific development, but the products you get from there are not really what the end user, and then I really mean the public, needs. There's still a gap. As an EPA, we are still in between. Sometimes I'm an end user, but I think the people in my area are the real end user. To find someone who pays for the match, the final match between what is being developed, the technology, the standards, etc., and what the people really need, that I find it difficult to find proper funding for it. It was said maybe government, and I see myself as local government, should define what people need. but we are also not really good at defining what people need. And the private sector, you know, if you sell the wrong thing, you will close your shop, you go bankrupt. So we need to think more from the client perspective and then see how the science that is being funded and the needs of the people, how we can get that together. That's a major challenge.
Living labs are all about capacity building. The trick is to find people who know. Capacity building means somebody knows something and somebody else doesn't, but that's somebody knows something else. And if you can create win-win situations where by teaching each other, learning from each other, they reach a common goal, then that capacity building will happen naturally and reciprocally. And then a fundamental complement to that is networking with realities in different localities, different situations, where they can learn from the differences and the similarities between the same dynamics happening in different contexts.
And Giacomo, tell us, how do we build capacity?
First of all, strengthening the cooperation mechanisms, because particularly in our case of SMEs, we are extremely capable to fill in enormous gaps, joining each other. So we have to believe much more in our capacities. And in order to reply to Robin's question, I think that you have a big mandate now to do not think that once the Annex 3 data specifications have been adopted by the Inspire Technical Committee, your work has to stop, because the fund starts now for the Annex 3 going to be implemented by the communities, and as we saw yesterday, all the thematic directives in place with all the connections, so we need your support.
Well, I'm not sure how many people in the audience will think as Annex 3 as fun, but Maria.
Yes, just a few words. I think that you can help a lot of university working with us. That's very easy, having common projects. For instance, just to give you an example, now we are starting with 2 new curricula, one on geoinformatics and the second one on ICT and innovation. Why not to be part of that, helping us in those projects?
Well, let me ask somebody who really knows about building capacity. Sanjay.
I'm sorry. Well, I have a question to European Commission, basically, with regard to the SMEs. You know, I'm not surprised by the facts and figures which has been presented that 98% of European geo companies are SMEs and 92% of them are less than 10 employees. Actually, that's the fact of the whole world. And having said that, you know, all these SMEs have a very unique DNA. They work on a very small, locally focused, you know, short-term goals, and we cannot change that. So, but at the same time, they offer the greatest infrastructure of connecting to the end users. They are the ones who are working with those end users. And Inspire Community, or Inspire as an initiative, ultimately is aimed at benefiting those users by providing that kind of information to the people. So is European Commission looking at strengthening, educating, empowering, or facilitating SMEs to carry forward their message and use that data for the users, or they're going to look at creating their own infrastructure for that?
Well, of course, this is a very interesting question, and although I work for the European Commission, I wouldn't dream of answering that question, but I'll defer to my boss. That's the advantage of having a boss. You can always decentralize things upwards. So.
Now, I think that it's quite clear since the beginning of the Inspire project that Inspire is a user-driven initiative. So the target of Inspire is support, as I mentioned in the directive, is support environmental policies and policies that could have an impact on the environment, but from the user management point of view. That means that in the future, the user are what we are targeting in terms of user of the infrastructures. So the emphasis until now has been on developing the infrastructure, developing the rules, but looking to, for example, today to the parallel session on cross-border application, you can see people that voluntarily are jointly working to develop cross-border application addressing specific user demands. So the answer is the user are the final target, but as you mentioned, is the small medium enterprise that in most of the cases are creating the bridge between the public infrastructure and the user community. So for me, the role of, just to comment on Mark Turano, so for me, in the future, this assembly should be more composed by small medium enterprise, and the balance should be maybe 50-50, because the small medium enterprise, in listening what are the users starting to express, then they can see which are the business and which are the future developments.
Well, and indeed, the European Commission has some programs specifically dedicated for SMEs, but let me ask an SME. Jerome, do you feel sufficiently supported in your work by the wonders of the European Commission? A yes or no answer would do.
No. I actually have a proposal on that part to make. And that was actually what I also wanted to say in response to the first question. One of the things that we try to do, and I really go down to what I'm working on most, is metadata. And actually on that part, what I've started and I've announced this in a workshop is a metadata project called Metadata 101. And the idea there is that in GeoNetwork, where we do everything with metadata profiles for countries, we face the problem of so many different profiles, not only in Europe, but across the world, that we need to support in the software. Now, the expertise for each of those profiles is coming out of countries themselves. So it's impossible, definitely impossible for my company to maintain that, but also impossible for the relatively small developer community that GeoNetwork is. So what I'm proposing, and where I'll ask at 1 o'clock when we meet here outside of the corridor with a number of national representatives using GeoNetwork, I'll also make the call, but I'll take the opportunity now to make it to JRC or to the Inspire project, is to actually support Metadata 101 with some funding to get a repository of metadata profiles that we all work on collaboratively in a GitHub environment, so we can all be sure that the metadata profiles are aligned, are kind of minimum basic implementations. We're at the implementation stage of Inspire, so this is quite critical. And we can collaborate on having good metadata profiles that are actually aligned, and where member countries and user communities or expert groups can start contributing their profile, maintain, build up knowledge. So my call is basically to you.
Well, it looks like your project could well do with talking to Robin, so that you can get those ideas into Arena, into the eyes, and join up. And
because that can then be used by not only GeoNetwork, but a lot of other initiatives.
Mike, do you have a final say? Want to say something before we close?
As far as capacity building, I think one thing we could do a better job at is to perhaps pay a little bit more attention to basic principles. That is, that at the very base level, what do people want to do? They want to publish, they want to discover, and they want to share. And so there are lots of different ways to do that. And I think innovation comes from presenting people with these basic behaviors. Our users would like to publish and discover and share. So let's start thinking about interesting, creative, disruptive ways to do this. And I think we've sort of lost touch with that. We get bogged down with all the different current technologies and current methodologies. But I think sometimes we lose touch of what people are actually wanting to do. In 50 years, they'll still want to discover, publish, and share. And in 150 years, they'll still want to perform these basic tasks. And there'll be new ways to do this, optimal ways, each sort of generation of technology, and with each new sort of revolutionary idea that comes out of small businesses or universities or the government.
Well, thank you very much, panel. Thank you very much, audience. I think we have reached lunchtime. I can certainly hear my tummy's grumbling. Therefore, it must be time to lunch. So please put your hands together for this excellent panel. And thank you very much, Maria. And thank you very much to all the panelists. And thank you very much from me.